everyone. Hi, good evening. If you could be quiet, we will start. Welcome to the League of Women Voters, Minnesota, Edina Voter Forum. I'm Susan Clark, Chairman of the Voter Service and Vice President in the League. I am going to announce what we do so everybody knows. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan volunteer organization that encourages citizens' participation in the forum, in government. While as a league we do studies and take stands on issues, we do not endorse or support political candidates or parties. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters, and the sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement by the League of any candidate. We have two forums this year, this one which includes 49A and B, and the one for City Council candidates, which is September 30th, that's Tuesday. I would like to introduce our moderator for the night, Alice Mormon, and she's moderated many of these. She is with the League of Women Voters, Minneapolis. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Before we get started, I would like to ask each of you to turn off your cell phone so you don't get a call that you don't want to answer, and also any other electronic devices that you may have with you. If you recall, our policies are that there's no photography or audio-visual recording during this forum. Thank you. The purpose of this evening's forum is to provide an opportunity to hear the candidates discuss the issues that are important to you. We will try to cover as many issues as possible in the time we have. If your questions are not addressed tonight, feel free to contact the candidates directly. All candidates who filed for office and who will be on the November 4th ballot were invited to this forum. I'd now like to explain the rules and formats for today's forum. Speaking order was assigned before the forum and will rotate with each question. Each candidate will have 1 minute to make an opening statement and 2 minutes to answer a question sent out in advance. Candidates will then have 1 minute to answer each question submitted by the audience and 1 minute to make a closing statement. A league volunteer will time candidate responses and indicate to candidates when they have 1 minute, 30 seconds, and when they are to stop. The volunteers are right there in the center, candidates, so you see their cues when they have them for you. Audience questions must be in writing and handed to a volunteer who is wearing a league button. Only the moderator will ask questions. The League of Women Voters of Edina determines which questions will be asked and attempts in good faith to cover the topics of interest indicated by the submitted audience questions. All written questions become the property of the League of Women Voters Edina. This forum is being videotaped. Please hold your applause until the end of the forum. Now I'd like to introduce each of the candidates and then we'll go to the questions. First, Dario Anselmo and Ron Erhardt. The candidates now will have 1 minute for their opening statements, and it will be in the same order that I introduced them. So, Dario, you get to go first with your 1 minute statement.
Sounds good, thank you. Well, welcome. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. Thank you all for being here tonight. Excited to be here for my first forum. A little bit about my background. I was born in Duluth, Minnesota. I grew up here in the Twin Cities. I have lived in Edina for 15 years with my wife, Jeannie, who's here tonight. And we have 3 kids that are in the Edina public school system. I started my first company here when I was 21 years old in Edina. After that, I ended up taking over and owning the Fine Line Music Cafe and operating that for nearly 20 years. I've been a member and a leader in some cases of a number of civic organizations in our community. The Warehouse District Business Association, Minneapolis Downtown Council in Minneapolis, the Bipolar Support Alliance and the Mental Health Association, and the Edina Ed Fund. I'm running tonight and in general because things in Edina seem pretty good, but I think we have some challenges in our state. I think we need to find ways to improve the business climate, to increase more job opportunities for people. And we also need to find a way to improve educational outcomes for everyone in the state. I'm hoping to take my 30 years of business and community experience and use those to be your next state representative. Thank you, and look forward to your questions.
Ron Erhardt will go with his 1-minute opening statement.
Good evening. I'm Ron Erhardt, your state representative. At the time I became your state representative, I had served 2.5 years in the Army in combat leadership. I was promoted 9 times to the position of Command Sergeant Major for the highest enlisted rank available. I had graduated twice from the University of Minnesota, a BA and a BBA. But before I went into the financial planning field, I ran a restaurant for a year. That was a friend of mine. I had 2, and I ran 1. After I went into the financial planning business, I was then, you're changing hands now. Then I worked for 25 years with individuals and many types of businesses planning their finances. I hold the professional designation of CLU and CFHC, equivalent to a master's in finance. Today I sit in the boards of 4 nonprofits in and around Edina, and I've managed, as a matter of fact, to get to 12,000 plus homes to find out what the folks are. Are you going to raise the flags? Okay, so you showed us different than that. So, all right.
Thank you. Now you'll have 2 minutes. This is the only question you get 2 minutes for, but you got it in advance. So, and we're going to rotate our orders. So, Ron, you will get to answer this question first, okay? The question is, what do you consider to be the biggest issue facing the state, and how would you address it as a member of the House of Representatives?
Well, I actually have listed 4 main topics on my agenda. Improve education funding, continuing to do that because Valenti lowered the bar so far that we had to dig our way out of the hole. And fiscal discipline on taxes and spending, which I exhibited by voting against the 2013 tax bill and fixed it up in the 2014 tax bill by voting for it. Modernizing transportation funding and women's workforce equity, which we did quite a chunk on. Transportation has been my bag for a number of years. I've been chair of the Transportation Committee, and I created big bills to satisfy the times of the moment in 2005 and 7 and 8. All 3 of those were vetoed by the governor, and we had struggled to get, even when that bridge fell down, we had to address then how we were going to handle the monies needed for transportation. So I have an enormous amount of skills in that area, and I've established relationships that no one here will even question, because I just know the people that are pulling the strings for different things. I just got a piece for the 3rd lane on I-94 from I-494 from 394 to the 694 interchange. And I did that because of my experience in finding the right people, finding the money in their budget, because they said they had no money even though I passed the bill. And after examining their finances, MnDOT, I found the money for them, and they agreed for the $24 million. We raised no taxes, but we're going to get that done, which will benefit thousands of commuters.
Thank you. Daryl, do you need me to repeat the question?
No, thank you. I'm just going to answer one topic. We'll take a little less time. The issue that I think is most important for our state is education. Education is one of the key foundations of our economy and certainly our democracy. Education affects everything from crime, economic growth, and even income equity. Education takes 42% of our state budget, so it's an important line item in our budget, and it's an important investment in our kids and our future. We need to make sure we're using those funds in the best possible way to get the best outcomes possible. Some of the things that I would want us to see us continue or to expand upon are things that we are doing here in Edina. I would like to see more local control at our school level or school board level, and I'd like to reduce some of the unfunded mandates that have been put upon our schools. I'd like to make sure that our tests are reasonable, that they're actually reflective of what kids are learning now and the needs that they have to take going forward. Testing people just to test people is a waste of resources and time. It's not a great way for kids to learn. I would like to continue the personalized learning that we've done here in Edina and try to take that statewide. I'd also make sure we have more instructional time for our kids. Closing the achievement gap is a goal that a lot of people have talked about. I think that's important here in Edina and certainly across the rest of the community. In Edina, our outcomes are pretty good. They could be better. Pre-K learning is something that has gone on a lot now with adding kindergarten. There's some talk about actually getting some grants to kids in economic need, and I think that's a great idea. Everyone should have an educational opportunity so they have a chance to be successful, productive members of society. Charter school authorization is something else that I would like to see more of. In places where the public schools are not serving the needs of the community, I think that we need to have that option and make it easier. So we have some charter schools, it's just difficult to get them. And when charter schools are not working, we need to make sure we defund them or remove their charters. And lastly, I think we want to find ways to bring the best teachers possible into the classroom. Our teachers are important. They're an important part of the education. We need to ensure we're supporting the right teachers and making sure that teachers are getting the training needs that they need to have. If we take these steps, I believe that we'll get the educational outcomes that our students deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. All of you probably know this, but I neglected to mention that these candidates are running for the office of House District 49A, just in case you didn't know that. Now we're going to turn to the questions from the audience. And the first question will go to Dario. Do you think we need more transportation funding for, among other things, roads, bridges, and light rail? If you do, how do we get it? Where do we get it?
You know, from the research and reading that I've picked up, it seems like we indeed need to have more funding. We certainly probably could work on our efficiencies and what we could do. I think we've had a lot of funding that's gone to light rail, and it seems like the roads and the bridges are not getting the full funding that they need. You know, 70% of our roads and bridges, in effect, I guess, are the kind of lanes for our commerce. So it's important that we find ways to get the money there that we need. How you actually go about that is something for someone who's actually elected to actually get to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Ron, the same question?
Transportation Finance Advisory Committee was formed by the governor, a lot of experts on it in the summer of 2012, and their conclusion was we have to raise the gas tax 40 cents over the next 20 years. Now, that's a chunk, but that's what it amounts to, because they're going to get the readings are they'll get about $39 million from existing sources, and they're suggesting to even do a reasonable maintenance on and keep the system like it is. They'll need another $21 million or 60 billion. Just so stand up and hear that one. And if you really want to do a world-class system of transportation that we really should have, then you're going to need 90 billion over the next 20 years. So get ready. It's going to have to come from somewhere. If it's not the gas tax, then some other means. And we're going to be looking for a modern way of doing that, if there's possible.
Thank you. The next question's on the environment, and it first goes to Ron. With climate change rallies being featured in the news, do you feel Minnesota has done enough on the issue of climate change?
What was the question?
With climate change being in the news, do you feel Minnesota has done enough to deal with the issue of climate change?
Well, Minnesota has done a lot, but we're all going to have to keep pushing on renewable energies of everything, and whether it be wind, bio, or electric, those are all moving forward. Minnesota has very stringent expectations, and they keep advancing the bar. So you can expect that we will be continuing to push on that.
Thank you. Dario.
I think Minnesota's done a very good job of being a leader in the renewable energy and trying to keep a lid on climate change. Up until this last year, the United States emissions were actually down. They've gone back up. You know, the question is sort of the balance is how much do these renewable energy mandates cost and the energy rates and how that affects our economy. I think the best forces for our change is when we've had technology that's actually taken us there. So it's nice to jumpstart some of these initiatives, but really having the battery technology, the solar technology, things like that, those really make a difference in terms of getting us to where we need to be. So it's great to see Minnesota being a leader. I think we've done enough. I think we should measure and see what our results are and then decide where we go from there.
Thank you. This is a question on education, and first goes to Dario. The state of Minnesota has a large achievement gap among different student groups. What do you think accounts for this disparity, and what do you think the Minnesota legislature should do to close the gap?
Well, the disparity seems to run around on sort of more ethnic lines and families that are in the cities. We certainly have some issues in the suburbs. So it seems that sometimes it's a question of families and what the structures might be. If you've got more single families, it certainly could be the amount of resources. I don't exactly know from what goes on downtown the suburbs. We seem to have some very good outcomes. So they've talked about pre-K learning and early learning, trying to get more dollars and support in that area, and I think that's something that the legislature could do. We'll see how all-day kindergarten affects that. They've talked about some mentoring and some early intervention. Actually, Mayor Rybeck talked about some programs that they would start with intervention in the pre-K, at third grade, and right on up through high school with early career counseling. So I think those are all things that they could do to hopefully help kids be more successful.
Ron, would you like me to repeat the question?
Sure.
The state of Minnesota has a large achievement gap among different student groups. What do you think accounts for this disparity, and what do you think the Minnesota legislature should do to close the gap?
Well, what accounts for it is we have a multinational crew in the inner cities, and a lot of them can't speak English, and they certainly can't read or write then, so we need early childhood and for starters, so we get them prepared for kindergarten to begin with. And for that, it's going to cost money because we need more teaching facilities, more facilitators, and it's a labor-intensive effort. And what has to happen is that we're going to have to fund it. I don't see any other reason not to if we're going to bring these people up for ready for K-12 and beyond. Otherwise, we'll have them in the criminal justice system by the time they're halfway through K-12.
I need a question. Thank you, question sorters. This question goes to Ron. What legislation do you plan to introduce if elected?
An increase in the funding for transportation. Is that a secret from anybody? Because I want you to know that's what I'm going to do. And that'll be a massive plan. The ones that I had in 05 and 06 were $6 and $7 billion. And that's all used up now. Another year, that's gone. We redid the bridges that we could. We built a lot of roads and interchanges. But that's only the beginning of what has to be done if we're going to continue to build out our, and I know that some of you folks don't like transit, but that's got to be part of the package, because to get roads and bridges, I discovered the first 6 weeks I was in the job of chair of the Transportation Committee that you need to give both sides some monies or you don't get the bill passed.
So, Dario, would you like to answer that question, please?
Could you give me the question again there?
What legislation do you plan to introduce if you're elected?
Legislation, well, I would certainly want to be working on the budget and finding a way where we can actually have a budget that doesn't require tax increases. So if that's a particular bill or not, that's the budget that we're overall setting the tone of our economy. So I want to make sure that our budgets grow in line with our economic output. So that's what I would be working on first.
And this question goes to you first, Dario. What is your stand on campaign finance disclosure bill that never came to vote last session?
I would like to say I pass on that because I don't think I'm familiar with it. So if that's a question here, so I'll let Ron take this one from here.
What is the reason for
What
not
is,
passing?
what is your stand on the campaign finance disclosure bill?
It was a sad day when I didn't pass, and it was held off by 2 or 3, probably 2 at the most, special interest groups who didn't want it passed. Regardless of the consequences, they were no, and their disciples said, okay, we'll vote no on it. As simple as that. It's absolutely a necessity, so we know where all this outside money, who's paying for stuff.
So, and to
I'm
Ron,
going to vote for it if it comes up again.
and as a follow-up question, Ron, what is your view of big money in politics?
Well, it's really destroying the intent of our whole democracy when, and I don't care if it's onions or unions or big business, if they can control what they're doing. You've got the Koch brothers on one side, and Senator Coleman's now got a group, and he's putting out material, and it's all money coming in from God knows where to put out really scurrilous stuff in a lot of times.
Dario, what is your view of big money in politics?
I wish it didn't cost so much to run for office. It's really a lot of work to raise the money. I don't think it's a good thing, whether we're talking about the independent expenditure groups or actually, the money that people raise. There are sufficient limits, I think, now on candidates right now, and you've got a limit of $1,000, which I think people are thankful that they can't give more than $1,000 to campaign. So.
This question goes to Dario first. What laws concerning a woman's right to choose under attack in many states? Oh, excuse me, let me reword that. With laws concerning a woman's right to choose under attack in many states, what is your specific position on choice? Would you favor restrictions?
I don't favor more restrictions on choice. I grew up with Roe versus Wade. I'm glad that there are options that support the position of life and that there's counseling that people have to get before they do that, but I wouldn't look to make any changes.
Thank you. Ron?
I've been endorsed by NARAL, Pro-Choice Minnesota, and Planned Parenthood Minnesota, South Dakota, and North Dakota, as long as I've been in the legislature, and I've always stood strong for a woman's choice. I actually have an experience of doing that when I've been called a baby killer.
So, next question, Ron, this goes to you first. It's on airport and airplane traffic. What should be done about the proposed new flight plan for Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport and the resultant airplane noise?
Well, I am about the only one that provided any kind of answer to that, and I said, we're not going to, the FAA runs the thing. Unless you can get to the federal officials, they're going to tell us what to do here. And I think that Metropolitan Airports Commission can mitigate a little bit, but they can't do very much. So I actually introduced legislation so that they will which they have already done. They've done a 2-week noise study. They tried to get a permanent noise tower, and the city was refused that. So I passed legislation to get them in here with portable stuff for 2 weeks, so we got a baseline. Now you got an argument. Rather than just standing in your backyard and counting the planes go over, you actually have an argument that here's the data and this is too loud, too noisy. And incidentally, they're monitoring this all the time. They can tell whatever house you live in, they can tell you what the flights were over that for the last 10 years. Because it's all on tape, they're monitoring constantly. But we have to keep pushing.
So, Dario, would you like me to repeat the question? Or?
No,
Okay,
thank you. When I've talked to people in Edina, especially in the east side and the corridors where these planes could be going, I certainly heard from people this summer about it when there was more traffic over here. It's definitely a big lifestyle, quality of life issue in Edina. As a pilot, I still understand a little bit what they're trying to do in terms of trying to consolidate those flights. It is tough because, the Federal Aviation does set those. In terms of our involvement with the FAA or with the MAC, those are things that we do have some influence, hopefully at the state legislature with the governor's office and talking to those people to see if we can make a difference. But it is a challenge. It's going to be difficult. I think we need to involve our federal partners in this to see if there's ways that they can spread the traffic out with still meeting their safety and their efficiency goals.
Thank you. Dario, this is a question about environment. How can the Minnesota budget address invasive water and land species, for example, Asian carp and emerald ash borer?
Well, I think the Asian carp and with the Department of Natural Resources and certainly with the funds that are available at the state level, they're working on some of these answers right now. I think they stopped the locks to keep some of the carp from coming up through the locks and through the water pathways. So I think we need to use those resources. Protecting our rivers, our lakes are very important. So I'm for spending the money that's necessary to try to resolve those issues.
Ron?
I co-authored a $10 million bill for aquatic invasive species. It's going to be applied to the counties by landings and boat docking procedures. And I also sit on the board of the Minnesota Lakes and Rivers Advocates, where we've hired a lobbyist to go after as many of the problems over there. The big problem is there hasn't been enough money to do anything with, and they've had to be convinced, and I think we're finally getting to the point where we're getting the attention of the various components that put money into the environment over there.
Thank you. This is a question on green energy, going to Ron first. Do you support any green energy initiatives, and how do you decide which ones to support?
Well, let's say we try them all and see which is most efficient. That we're pushing forward on more than one front. Lately, the wind has become a second maybe to the front on electricity, and biomass is still sneaking around there, and so we're moving ahead with probably across the board, and we've set mandates for the utilities on what they have to produce in green energy, and that's what we're doing.
Okay, Dario.
In terms of initiating new clean energy, I think it's great that we have the clean energy initiatives we have out there, and I'd like to see how those work before we start adding new ones to them. It's great to see the changes that we've had, but in terms of actually adding new ones, I don't have any particular initiatives. If we do add them, in terms of breaking them into segments, I'd rather just see a certain level set and let companies try to figure out how they're going to get there instead of picking wind over solar. Over biomass. There's all sorts of different options we could be looking at.
Thank you. A question on the economy, going first to Dario. While the economy is improving, there is still a strong need to create new jobs that pay wages high enough to support a family. Could you let us know at least one idea for creating new, well-paying jobs in the state?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we could do is making sure our business climate is competitive enough so we can keep jobs here and try to grow the jobs. I think that there's a number of industries that maybe would be here where it's become more difficult. We've certainly moved jobs a lot of places. We've certainly seen the water companies here. We've certainly seen food companies here. So I think things that would increase entrepreneurship, that would be other ways to sort of bring more jobs here.
Ron?
Well, the biggest thing that the government can do is provide the biggest bonding bill they can build. That they can, the bonding houses will allow, because that we've had very low interest rates, and that puts people to work immediately. But that isn't a long-term solution. It is 3 to 5 years, or however long the projects take. And that puts literally thousands of people to work. And that's what the government should be doing, rebuilding its infrastructure while they have the low interest rates. We need road money so bad and bridge money so bad that is a prime example of what should have been done instead of piecemealing through a couple of those bonding bills and not putting out the maximum effort that we could have.
This is a question about health care, and it goes to Ron first. What do you like about the MNsure healthcare exchange? If you're opposed to it, what would you propose as a realistic alternative?
I think we're stuck with it, whether we like it or not, and we have to keep working at it and to improve it. I think the concepts are good. The rollout was the providers were not selected correctly, whether it be this state or whether it be the federal affair. So what do I like about it? It insures people that are not otherwise insurable, and we've released, we're probably the second lowest state as far as uninsureds go now. We have really made great advancements in the number of people who are insured. And if we don't insure them, then they go to the emergency rooms at Hennepin County General or wherever, and we end up raising our property taxes to pay for their health care. And we should insure them and get it done.
Dario, do I need to repeat the question, or you can?
Thank you. I think there's been a number of problems with MNsure, from the rollout and the cost that it's taken, and I think right now having the number one provider dropping out shows that there's some problems with it. So the goal in our state is to have people healthy and taken care of, and ideally insured in some way, shape, or form. And we have a safety net to cover people that don't make that on the bottom. We need to make sure that we encourage employers to be providing insurance ideally through their employees, as well as wellness programs. And we want to make sure that we have a competitive exchange, if that's what we have to have, that's out there. I think bringing in more competition and even letting some nonprofits come in here to see if we can try to solve it that way too.
This is another question on job growth, but with a little different twist. Recently, our governor has gained a lot of attention by bringing the Super Bowl to our state. It goes to you, Dario, first. And other elected officials have attempted to bring the movie industry to our state. They claim that these entertainment venues will create thousands of jobs and add millions of dollars to the state's revenue. Do you think this is a viable long-term economic strategy?
I'm not sure if that's Super Bowls or World Series or incentives, but I think it's having winning sports teams would be great. Then we can have all kinds of events here. That's maybe a little tougher in Minnesota, but it's interesting. I think it's something that a lot of people want to do. We do that. We spend money on these resources to try to bring them in here. I think that having a vital, vibrant media business in town here, like we have, and supporting that. And I think that some of those things make sense. The actual viability, I don't know. I've not measured it out, but I think we need to pick and choose where we spend our money in these things.
Ron?
Well, they claim, those in the field claim that Jingle Bells with Arnold Schwarzenegger brought $60 million into the state when they cut that. And so if you get the right, if you figure out what the best deal is, I think maybe that's a heck of a job promotion. There are a lot of states that put a lot more into wooing film companies in here than Minnesota does. So I think it's a good idea, but you have to choose carefully, just like you do anything else.
Thank you. This question is on gun violence, and it goes to Ron first. Gun violence has increased across the country with some well-publicized mass shootings. While murders, accidents, suicides continue to happen every day. What are two ideas that you have that would reduce gun violence?
I think we just did one in the last session, or maybe 13, whereas we did not allow spouses to have guns that were in conflict with their spouse. I don't know what the name of that is, but it's something like that. And that the gun lobbyists actually agreed that that was a good idea, and they went along with it. It wasn't a big struggle. but it's a big struggle to get anything much more than we're talking about, than I just mentioned. There was Representative Paymar held hearings that went on for weeks, days, when there'd be hundreds of people there walking up to his podium and showing their guns as they walked in with them. So that's a pretty tough lobby.
So, Dario?
The bill that Ron had mentioned earlier that passed, and it did pass with Republican support, which was good in terms of, I think it was domestic abuse
Domestic abuse.
Victims that we're doing that. So that's something that had support. In terms of other reasonable ideas to deal with gun violence, I've had that situation in my family where I've lost a family member to gun violence. So I'm not sure if the laws that are out there or the things that they're proposing for more gun restrictions are going to actually make that happen. It's a difficult one. I think most of us don't want to see criminals or mentally ill people have access to guns. So I think the biggest problem is getting the illegal guns away from the criminals. And I'm not sure if I have a solution for that.
So, thank you. This will be our last question, and it goes to Dario first. What is your position on school vouchers for use in public and private schools?
That sounds like a question from the 80s, but I'll go try to address that. I don't know if I would say I'm a voucher fan as much as I would be for school choice. So if people are in schools that are underperforming, I think that's an option that exists there. I think for people who are actually going to private schools, that's another question. So I'm not a voucher advocate.
Ron?
Well, even though the Constitution says we can't cross the barrier between church and state, and I think that's a good idea when it comes to funding, it's still done somewhat in our laws, the credits and so forth that are given. But I am very much in favor of the separation of church and state, and I don't want money from the state to go to church affiliated schools and religious affiliated schools.
Now it's time for your closing remarks, and you have 1 minute, and we'll start with Dario.
Thank you. Thank you again to the League of Women Voters. And thank you everyone here for all your good questions. Picked up a couple extra questions I didn't think were out there, and that was great. It's great to always pick up new information. It's great to be in this community with all the people that are actively involved in all the issues that they are. My wife, Jeannie, and myself, who've raised our 3 kids here and sent them to these great public schools, feel very fortunate to be here. And it's made me to want to work hard to try to make our community better. My priorities going forward really are kind of just twofold, are to improve education in our state. I want to support the great schools that we have here in Edina, and I want to make sure that the opportunity gap is narrowed and that our schools in general raise their standards. I want to make sure everyone is employed to their full potential, and improving the business climate I think would be one way to do that, to increase jobs and economic activity. I want to make sure that everyone also has affordable health care that they have access to. I want to increase more competition and find ways to improve the system that we have. I will work hard at these priorities. I want to find ways to keep our community united in these causes. In short, I'd like to use my experience and to try to find solutions. I'm looking for your vote this November 4th. Thank you.
Ron?
Well, I mentioned earlier that my 4 objectives, with the emphasis being on the modernizing the transportation funding system, was improve educational funding, and I mean by that our post-secondary schools, public schools, were running on Minnesota and Minneapolis were running on a 1998 budget, because plenty cut the hell out of everything there. And now we got kids getting out of college. The average fund there is, the average O is about $31,000, and it goes way beyond that for a lot of people. We've got to bring that back in line so that people are not afraid to venture beyond high school and find the money somehow with grants or whatever you might do to fund. And right on down the line to early childhood. And but I am going to offer, if elected, an improved transportation funding bill. Women's workforce equity is another thrust that we started, and we'll have to continue.
That concludes our forum this evening. I would like to thank the candidates for participating and for willing to participate in the democratic process by running for office. Thank you to the League of Women Voters of Edina for sponsoring this forum. This forum has been taped for broadcast on Edina Community Channel 16 and will be shown on Monday at 7 p.m., Tuesdays at 3 a.m. and 11 a.m., Thursday at 7 p.m., and Fridays at 3 a.m. and 11 a.m. through November 4th. The forum will also be available for viewing on the internet through the City of Edina, www.edinamin.gov. Thank you for attending tonight's forum. Audience, please remember to vote on Tuesday, November 4th. Good evening.
I wanted to thank the moderator. I forgot. Thank you. Huh?